How are you guys all doing today? I am here at the kitchen counter about to sharpen a knife. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing, checking out some of my other content. I have a whole range of different stuff, but sharpening is something that I've done a lot of and a lot of videos on. What I have here today is this nice little J.A. Henkel's International. This is a single man German kitchen knife. This is a large one. I picked up this one and a smaller one, probably one that's 5 or 6 inches or so. Picked the two of them up at a yard sale together, which is really cool, and I used them for a long time. I don't use them a lot now because I usually use my custom Santokus, my own knives, but I still like these for like slicing meats and stuff because of that long thin blade. It's nice. And with you Americans, Thanksgiving coming up, I figured I'd do a sharpening video just showing you guys how I would sharpen a knife like this. Now, I constantly get asked about this stone holder. This is just the simple Nanawa stone holder. It's got the threaded ends here with these nice knurled knobs so that you can pinch a stone. You can hold any size stone. Of course, this slides in and out. But we are going to start sharpening. Now, notice this knife has no edge whatsoever. If you look at it, the light test, you get it under the light, you can see that it's reflecting light all the way along. So we're going to have to start with a coarse grit. I'm going to start way down there with my, what is this, the Sigma 2 Select, I believe. It's a ceramic stone, and it's very aggressive. This is a 240 grit stone, I believe, and it cuts really quickly. But for a knife like this, I always say to use the technique to lay your knife flat on the stone if you're having trouble finding your angle, and tip up until your shadow disappears. With a knife that's real thin like this, because this one is quite thin, that's hard to do. It's hard to see a shadow anywhere along it, it's so thin. So in my opinion, the angle, unless you're in a professional kitchen, the angle is not vital. I would just pick an angle that seems decent. If you've sharpened the knife a few times, you can see what it can hold up to. That would help. But if it's your first time, I would just pick an angle like so and start. Okay? You want to focus on holding that angle. You can hear how coarse that stone is, but we've got a little bit of work to do, a little bit of steel to remove. I'm going to do full passes. Since this knife doesn't have any real amount of belly or anything, I can do a nice long stroke, full passes like this. And I do use back and forth strokes. I constantly get asked that, is it okay to do back and forth, or should you just do cutting passes or anything? I always use back and forth strokes. If your knife is coming new from factory, you can make 1 or 2 passes on the stone and see where you're contacting that edge. If you're too shallow, if you're too steep. This knife, of course, I bought it used. I can't tell. I don't know what the factory edge was. So I have always just picked an angle that was about right. You kind of get an inkling, I'll say, these sort of things. Now, what am I looking for when I'm sharpening? So I'm not counting strokes per side, but I'm paying attention to try to give an even amount of time, at least close to it. The stone doesn't cut that fast to make your edge go way out of skew with even 10 or a dozen passes. So it's not that big a deal. When I started out, I thought it was kind of vital to be even with my number of strokes, but it's not that big a deal. What I'm looking for to finish up on a single stone is to, especially with this starter stone, is to have created a new apex. Remember when we started, I could just carelessly drag my fingers along that edge. Now I've actually established a new edge. So the two pieces of the two angles now come to an actual point. You'll start to get what's called a burr form, or a little bit of wire. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm almost there. So I'll just give a little bit more water on my stone. When I'm finishing up on a stone, I like to get rid of some of that slurry and make the stone nice and wet. And then I'll just work cutting strokes only when I'm finishing up on a stone. Now I always sharpen with two hands on my knife. Something you do have to be careful of when you're sharpening with two hands is not to be putting any downward pressure out here. So this hand is just to guide. If you do put any downward pressure, you're breaking your edge here over the corner of your stone, which can really hinder your sharpening progress. Or what I've also found is that bending here might allow part of your edge here to lift just by the way the tension is working. So this part of your edge might lift a little and you might not get that even contact on the stone. So now I just finished up with some lighter single cutting strokes. If I feel my edge, I'm actually coming to an apex there, so there's a nice bite. There's a slight burr on there now. I'm just going to leave it at this point and go to my next grit stone. What I'm going to choose here, let's choose my blue-black Kuramaku, I believe it's called, by Shapton. It's the Shapton Professional Series. This is a lovely stone. I believe it's a 320 grit, but it feels, the difference between this 320 and the 240 in the Sigma Select is a massive difference. You can even hear how different it sounds. So I'll start off on this stone here now, exactly how I started off on the other stone. Forward and back strokes, covering the entirety of the edge. And I'm working now to remove all the scratches from that Sigma Select stone. If you're looking for a nice stone, this stone cuts so nicely. This was actually a gift from paulsfinest.com. A little bit more water as I'm almost done now with the stone. You give it a little rub with just your hands, and you can loosen up all the the muck that you formed on there. It's a good tea. Now, when I look at my edge, what I want to make sure is that I still have a nice apex, I still have some burr, and you'll be able to see that and feel it at this stage because we're still at such a coarse grit. Of course, a light test to make sure it's not reflecting any light, and that you've removed all the scratches from the previous grit and replaced some excuse me, the scratches from this grit. Now I'm going to do those slightly lighter single passes again, so just one for one, cutting only, so not going back and forth at this point. Make sure you get right from heel all the way out to the toe of your blade. And at this grit here now, my edge should feel really grabby. If you have a nice burr there, the edge is going to feel, it's just going to bite into your skin. So you definitely wouldn't want to do that careless dragging that I did before, because it wants to bite flesh at this point. I'm going to give it a few more passes. And now we're done with this stone. Now I'm going to jump right from there to my 1000 mesh, Shapton glass stone. These are really cool stones. But I'm going to jump right to there. And then I'm going to use my 600 grit nanowatt Nagura just to clean up the surface. These are really handy if you've never used one. These are really handy to freshen up the surface. They just cut away your stone ever so slightly. You're not really flattening with this, but it can take down some very minor highs and lows. Or if you have a bit of extraneous particle or something stuck in your stone, this will help work it out. But I'll just wash that mud off here now. And here she is, ready to go. Look how nice and clean that is now. I love it. And this is a really nice stone. Cuts rather quickly. You can see that color change already in the stone. Cuts pretty quickly for a 1000 grit. But the feel of it, just like it's got this velvety feel. It's just so nice. Check out that residue already building up there for how quick it's cutting. And notice I'm back to doing the forward and reverse strokes. So I do pretty much the same thing on every stone. I'm looking for the same things, keeping the same angle. Now just a little trick that I picked up from Murray Carter, and that is when I'm with this slightly finer stone like this, when I'm finished with it or almost done, I'm just going to drag my edge through something soft, like a little bit of pine here or a little bit of leather, just super softly, and that'll help just pull off any wire burr that may be hanging. And your edge may change feel a little bit, may not really, but I like to do it just to make sure that I've removed that burr. Clean up my stone a little bit and just give a few more single cutting stroke passes. Still using a little bit of pressure, not a lot, not near as much as when I started. Now some of you guys might be real surprised, some of you long-time followers of the channel might be real surprised now that I'm going to be done with this grit. So this is something I've been experimenting with over the past year, and that is finishing on lower grits. So on the belt grinder in the shop, when I sharpen the belt grinder, I do 600 grit and then I buff the edge. And lately I've been stopping at 1000 grit. And I really like the texture. In the kitchen for everyday use, cutting like cutting fresh meats or cutting like basic vegetables and stuff, I've really been liking the 1000 grit. It's not quite as polished. It's not as silky through some stuff, but for other stuff like meats, I like that little bit coarser, a little bit more toothy of an edge that a 1000 grit provides. And of course it's a lot more serviceable because now I'm already done. On a 1000 grit like this, if you've played your cards right, the edge should be ultra grabby there now. Like it just wants to chop through my skin with the lightest touch. It's just got that grabbiness to it. And of course it'll still do your basic tests like dice paper with ease, but I do like the serviceability of the only 1000 grit edge. And like I said, I do like the texture of how it handles certain foods, and that's just in my home kitchen with the stuff I cook day to day. And I never cook things like fish, or very rarely anyways. So, and those are the types of foods where you might want a real fine edge for. But that is my sharpening video. I hope you guys learned a little something. I hope there are a few tips or takeaways there for you. I hope you Americans have a good Thanksgiving coming up in a week or two. Thank you for watching. Like I mentioned at the start, please subscribe. The button's down below this video. Check out some more of my content. Hit that like button below this video. Leave me a comment. Tell me if there's anything different that you do, or if there's a different stone that you want an opinion on, or that you think that I should use. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.